to the February meeting of the Children and Young People and Lifelong Learning Committee, as I see on the front page of the documents. And a very belated Happy New Year to everyone. Just to remind people that this meeting will be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. So do we have any apologies, declarations of interest? Lucy? Sorry, Sederunt and apologies.
So far we have 17 members present. We are quorate, and I have apologies so far from Councillor Dempster, Councillor Wiper, Reverend McFadden and Mel McGill. Is there any other late apologies? Not present so far are Councillor Brodie, Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Karen Crothers, Councillor Diggle, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Hislop and Elaine Dennis.
Lucy, do you have any declarations of interest? Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Item 7, just for transparency, my wife used to be the treasurer of one of the organisations that are quoted in that paper, so but I'll still take part in the debate.
Sorry, no others? In that case, can we move on to the meeting of 12th of December on page 3, and this is for approval. Is everybody happy with that being a true record? Just while we're on that, at 8.5, it was agreed that I would write to the Cabinet Secretary, John Swinney, to invite him to come down and visit the various sites in the Dumfries Learning Town that we started work on, and also the Dalbeattie campus. So I have written to him, and I have received an acknowledgement, and I'm still awaiting a more detailed response. So, hopefully he will come down at some point. So if we move on to item 4, early learning and childcare, planning for the expansion towards 1140 hours by 2020-21. And Gillian's going to speak. Gillian, is there anything you want to add to the paper?
No, we recognise there are a number of aspects to this paper, so Claire and Liz have also contributed, so we were happy to take any questions.
This is obviously a very major expansion of the early years programme. It's almost doubling, so we've increased from I think it's 475 hours to 600 hours, and I don't think that's been too difficult because there's quite a bit of spare capacity within the system. I think expanding to 1140 hours is going to be a major exercise, and obviously we need to start planning as early as possible for this, because the deadline for introduction to this is 2020, which is only 3 years, and we are talking about major expenditure, both in capital and revenue, and also in staff, in order to utilise the hours. So, Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. I presume it's generally agreed that it would be impossible to deliver the 1140 hours ELC by 2021 without the input and the cooperation of our Commission providers and childminders. Unfortunately, I've been frequently lobbied by these providers because they feel that no meaningful consultation has taken place with them regarding the implementation of the 1140 hours. Specifically, clarification is needed on the following 3 points. The Commission providers need to know where they will fit into the local authority plan for 1140 hours. With reference to paragraph 3.4, are we intending to provide wraparound care in all of these 21 refurbishments? And reminding you of the difficulties with additional registration that will be required by the Care Commission. And finally, are the plans to open school nurseries for more than 38 weeks? Thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy to respond, Chair. Thank you. I think it's a very valid point the elected members making there. Partner providers are a key delivery mechanism for us across this region, and we value and respect that. They certainly have been involved in discussions to date, but we absolutely acknowledge the point that they're going to be key to the consultation process going forward. You know, a great challenge for us is to get the clarity out of government, and we're working closely with government officials to really understand what that means. And we've certainly been asking the question on their behalf about how partner providers can be part of this delivery process. So absolutely value that. In terms of the exact model for the various solutions that we're proposing, it will be bespoke in every case, because we know the geographical disparity across our region demands us to work with each locality to get the right solution, acknowledging what private providers are there and what existing provision are there. So it will be very much a mixed model, which they'll be part of. We acknowledge the process around registration, and early discussions have been had with the Care Inspectorate. The Care Inspectorate have been charged by government to review design guidance and to look at registration. So, for example, you know, could you be allowed to register outdoor places to make sure that we have a really flexible and efficient model? And in terms of your last point was around school nurseries. Do you want to just clarify that one again for me, please?
Well, I'm not. There was. Are the plans to open school nurseries for more than 38 weeks?
So it will be a model that we'll be looking at, but it's very much coming out of the discussions at a local level and being informed by the parental consultation, which is a key part of the 2014 Act. So we are looking at providing solutions which meet the needs of the parents in that community. So that might be an option that's on the table.
Thank you, Chair. And regarding my second point, regarding paragraph 3.4, are we intending to provide wraparound care in all of the 21 refurbishments? I don't know. Forgive me if you clarified that. I wasn't quite sure.
So the point I was responding to that is all of the models are being developed. It may be that the wraparound care in relation to that in response to the requirements from the governments in the Act. But as I say, it's very much developed on a centre-by-centre solution with partner providers and the needs of the parents in that community. So I wouldn't suggest that we would be able to state at this stage that all those establishments would provide wraparound care.
Thank you. That means kind, Chair. With that in mind, I'd like to hear more what other members have to say, but I would like leave to propose an amendment to 2.5, but not at this stage. I'd like to listen to what other people have to say first. Thank you.
Dennis?
Sorry, is it me, Chair? Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's sort of following on, Chair. That my concern is there is still a feeling out there that there's a them and us situation between the private or voluntary provider and our education service. And in small rural areas, there's really a great concern, because within the voluntary private sector, there are quite a lot of jobs involved here, never mind the people that need to work. So I was welcome to paragraph 3.8, where we're talking about a whole community approach. But are we going to be able to roll that out right across the region over this coming year? Because if we don't, I actually can see some of the private providers or voluntary ones actually going to the wall in rural areas, which is a double whammy, because it's not just, say, 13, 14 jobs in some cases, it's also 100 families or maybe more that are then going to struggle to get to work. So I've got to say, I've been lobbied as well, and have great concern that we've still got this them and us, which it shouldn't be. This should be one service providing one system that works right across the piece. Because if it doesn't, then, as I say, I can see detriment that's going to hit communities. It's going to be very, very, not just dangerous for the families, but bad for the children.
Okay.
We'll take the feedback on board and absolutely make sure that we step up in terms of consultation engagement with valued providers. I reiterate the point that it is key that we do work with partner providers and we do value them, and they provide a really good quality experience, particularly in the more rural or bespoke areas. So we actually acknowledge that. As officers, we've had challenges ourselves. We've asked the question from government to say, look, we need clarity and the ability. Are we going to get revenue funding? Are we capital funding? Are partner providers entitled to that? And we're still working through those very complex issues. And I think we all acknowledge I think what you're getting to is the crux of the challenge, and why we've brought this paper to committee today is that we need to start, and we need to start early to get the right solutions in place. There will not be a complete rollout over the next 12 months. We have up to 2020 to deliver this. But I think what we're trying to do and communicate in the paper, and hopefully it's coming across okay, is that we need to start now, because this is a complex solution to get right across the region. And you were asking your consideration and advice to give us that direction to exploring the models, developing cost solutions, maybe asking a future committee for some money to get this started for exactly the point you've just made there.
So, Chair, I presume if there are issues and difficulties as councillors we find, then we can bring them back and they will be urgently looked at.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because we do recognise the importance of the partnership providers. You know, the whole system collapses if they withdraw. But I think also there's so much unclarity in terms of what's being offered by this. I mean, if anybody's read Appendix 1, the response, I think it was a very good response. A lot of it is for more detail. You know, how much flexibility are we looking for? Who's going to fund this? You know, there's probably more unknown than there is known at the moment. I know going to the executive group meeting over at COSLA, this is true right across the country. You know, local authorities are worried about, we've got a 3-year timescale now, and we don't really know anything. Don't know what the funding is going to be. You know, we're talking about, as I said earlier, massive amounts of funding are going to be required. Where's that going to come from? We as a local authority can't afford to fund this within our existing resources. It'll have to come from central government. So, you know, there's an awful lot unknown.
Can I just say I'm delighted the paper is here and we can have this discussion. I think that's superb.
Yeah, well, equally, I think we need to, as been asked, look at how we actually are going to provide this and start planning even more than we have been, I assume, as to how we get this into position so we are ready to hit the ground running. Ted?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question relating to 3.6 on page 10, and it's regarding the funding from the Scottish Government. In 3.6, initially it says that 49.6 million was allocated for the first phase, which I thought was for capital. The second part of the 3.6 indicates that, you know, actually there's only 30 million for capital and 31 million for revenue. I just wondered if my interpretation of that was accurate.
Yes, it is.
I mean, yeah, following up from what the Chair says, you know, this is going to take a huge amount of capital investment, you know, to actually accommodate, you know, the rise in the number of hours being provided. And we do need some clarity on this. I note from the report and your response to the Scottish Government that there's actually more questions than there is answers. And we need to pursue that, because this is a major challenge for any local authority, and particularly for one that has a lot of rural communities. So I hope you will be following up on that.
Willie?
Thank you, Chair. My reference is to 3.10 in the report, Chair, and there's an example being given there in terms of a community group in Springham, and it's recognised by the schools and the parent councils that the nurseries are the lifeblood of the school role in moving forward and everything else. And it's I'm particularly referring to Portpatrick, that equally had a nursery in the village hall, but it seems to have collapsed, you know, for whatever reason. But, you know, if we're to look at nurseries and providing for the whole of the region, the west of the region as well, and in some of our more rural parts, then I would hope we would be looking at where these do exist and how do we support and assist in terms of if there is space available in the school for the third sector to be encouraged and move into it. Similarly, in terms of nursery, there is a transition nursery in St Joseph's Primary in Sederunt, and again the intention or the aspiration was also always to move into a full-blown nursery, and I would like to think that this could form part of this whole consultation in how we move forward. Reference has been made by other members regarding the third sector, private sector, and how we engage with them. And I hope that is the case, that we do. And Claire's given a commitment there that she will move into that. So that's reference to 14 in the response document. But I'm looking at 17 in the response document. Do parents and carers face any barriers in accessing support with the cost of ELC provision beyond the funding entitlement, as Ted has referred to in 3.6? Does this part form any part of the anti-poverty strategy? And if so, could someone please give us some indication just how we're tackling this in terms of anti-poverty strategy and areas where people are finding childcare or whatever particularly expensive and canny access? Have we got this as a key, a KPI, a performance indicator, and how we deal with that particular issue under the strategy?
Julie?
It is not part of an action against the anti-poverty strategy specifically, but the parental consultation was undertaken prior to much of the announcement about the 1140, and I know that the Scottish Government's intent in developing the 1140 was about affordable childcare. But I think it's certainly part of our overall strategic approach to develop this picks up many of the points that you've raised, and if the members are agreeing today for us to come back in March with a fuller strategic approach, I'm sure we'll take those points on board.
Dick?
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Witts and Councillor Mail, I've also representations from the private sector. I've got an email on the 28th November from a private provider concerned about the crisis in the private sector, struggling to survive financially, and questioning the council's whether the council's investment in some of the primary schools has been necessary when the private providers could provide capacity on that. I sent that off as a EMS, but I haven't seemed to have a reply or that. I don't know if it's reached the education department on there, but I'll chase that up. It was copied into the Annandale South councillors, North councillors, Annandale South, Annandale, Estdale and East, and also to Alistair Witts, so he must have got a copy of that as well, but I don't know if he got an update to that. So, any comments on that email? It also went to MSPs and MPs.
Claire?
So in considering potential options, and I'd probably stress that we're still in the process of actually defining what the solution is to deliver, as we get more information from government. So in defining and looking at an area in terms of, we look at see what is available in existing council nurseries, but also what's in private providers, and we'll look to see what capacity private providers have got to accommodate more spaces and more activity. We certainly wouldn't want to recreate a facility, and we shouldn't recreate a facility if there is the provision there in private providers. So we do a demands and needs assessment to check that we have sufficient provision across both sides of the camp to make sure we can deliver in the 1140. And that's certainly informed the solutions to date, because from an authority perspective, I'd be suggesting that we want to minimise any additional capital, because with additional capital comes additional responsibilities in terms of maintenance, cleaning, staffing these structures. So we're certainly doing a holistic report to make sure that we're not, as far as we can, duplicate provision. I would say, and mindful of that as well, is we have to be mindful of, we've had situations where childcare provision has disappeared quite quickly from partner providers in specific situations. And we've got to look at how we manage that when those circumstances happen, because we still have a responsibilities and authority to deliver on that commitment. We want to do it with our partner providers, but mindful that if the partner provider is not able to do that, we still have the responsibility. So there's a really delicate and sensitive situation to take forward, and making sure we're efficient, effective, but actually responsible as well.
Nick?
The question was whether that letter had been received by the Education Department, and was there a response?
I will commit to look in for that. I have not seen it.
Ronnie?
Yes, just on that point of provision, I understand there isn't enough clarity coming from the Scottish Government. I think that's creating its own issues with trying to find a solution to any upcoming problems within that. Private providers are, one of the mainstays, as you have stated, about the rural provision. But I don't know whether it was a diktat, I don't know whether it was just an off-the-cuff statement, but I remember Nicola Sturgeon saying that the expectation is to provide it in-house, in schools. And I don't know whether, there is any qualifications within that or any further information on that. But it creates difficulties for this particular area as well, if that is the case, that we've got to try and find within all our premises in our schools. If that is the case, I don't know whether it's, came back as a fact or whatever.
Okay.
We're aware of that statement that was made in public, but it's certainly not translated into any of the guidance and documents we've received from government. If anything, I think there's been a progression in the development of that thinking to understand the importance of partner providers and that we need to provide a holistic solution with them. So certainly we are not looking, and there's certainly no diktat that we're aware of to say that we have got to provide within the school estate only. We're certainly working on a mixed model with partner providers.
But there's no definitive statement that's came out that's still not the case from Nicola Sturgeon, that is a statement and it would be provided in schools. Has anything came back from that?
Glenn?
No, there's been nothing more from that statement.
Once again, I think it just emphasises the need to have more detail about what's being expected of local authorities and how we are going to provide, because the whole thing just foments unrest, and we do need clarification about a lot of detail. George?
Yeah, by definition, I'm non-political here. I'm representing parents. But I'm encouraged that folk understand that there is conflict between the private and the schools. And without wanting to labour the point, just a wee sort of personal experience, as chair of my own primary school, we went through a year, 18 months of really, really quite nasty confrontation between the school and the private nursery sector, and it was crying out for collaboration, and we tried to get them sitting around, but it was so deep-seated, and there was a fear of jobs and careers, and then parents getting behind one camp and the other. And what, for me, I would ask of the very able professionals out there is to take a lead on finding a strategy where the work collaboratively for both parties, and more importantly the parents and the children, because as soon as it becomes a them and us, it becomes irrational. And we need to keep it rational and structured and reasonable and try and get the best outcome, because the ambition of getting 1,140 hours is smashing. But to make it effective, we need absolutely top quality collaboration. So what I would ask is that we take a lead from the top and try and take away the irrationality of it all, so as we get a common sense approach that delivers something that's really effective.
Claire?
I'm absolutely mindful of that, and we've been looking at local authorities about how they've effectively engaged with partner providers, and there's a good model in Fife with working groups and that. I'd say we have had some good discussions in terms of more detailed level. You know, the trial bid that we've been successful for Newton Stewart and Minigaff has got a partner provider, and we're working closely with them to get their input into coming up with a solution. And it's a really good experience for us because it's allowing those barriers, those issues to come through, so that we can make sure we've got a process and protocol which effectively engages with our partner providers based on our actual real life experience.
Yeah. Can you just have a wee follow up with that? What we found at Eastriggs was that the nursery could benefit greatly from the senior staff at the primary school and vice versa. The parents were seeing a different delivery model from the private sector to the school, and I think there was a lack of a meeting of minds. And if there was genuine, what we tried to do was get them to sit down together and see the benefits of working together, crucially for transition, because the children at the nursery, at the school, were clearly getting a better transition. The private sector thought that there was a slight bias there, but from my objective experience, it wasn't. It's just that the kids that were at the school, it was a more natural transition, so there was a need to try and integrate them at an earlier stage. But because of the confrontation and the competition for places, it just never happened. So I think that's what we need to develop and take away the fear factor and see what's best for all parties.
Andy?
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to try and concentrate here on the kids and what's actually happening. At 3.4, we've got all these schools that have been refurbished and work done, and what review's been done on the knock-on effect for any partnership providers in that area, in those areas? And if the work's been done, can we get it? If it hasn't been done, can we get it done, and can we get a report back to here to actually let us see at first hand from the people an independent view of what the knock-on effect has been to the small partnership nurseries or in areas where all of a sudden, and not just partnership nurseries, but also the childminders, other residential childcare, has it affected them? Right? Has it put their sustainability in danger? Because if they fold, right, has been so very well put by other members in here, we've got a catastrophe in our hands, because my understanding is probably about a third of our young people access early learning and childcare through partnership providers. So we're going to ask if we can get a report back with a review on schools that were adapted and the knock-on effect to all the other childcare providers around that area. That'll give us a better idea before we go forward as we move forward into this full implementation. And that's the kind of thing we would need. The other question is, we mentioned registration of premises, clear in our usual efficient manner, put that across. But nobody mentioned the staff registration. What changes have to be made to staff registration to look after early years and to out with the school time? Because that, unless it's changed, I'm looking at Liz, right, unless it's changed, right, that's a different registration process from being a teacher or being a nursery nurse. So what's that going to cost, and what have we done to look at the school, all the staff in the school, to actually find out how many of them, what extra qualifications might they have to do, right? What would the registration requirements might be? We really could need to get that back. And finally, it's not really, don't need an answer. It's just, I'm thankful to Ted to remind everybody that the Scottish Government moved the funding for the sector to 61 million from 49.6. But thanks for that, Ted.
Claire?
Okay, so in terms of the 600 hours, the development of the 600 hours model and solution was developed in conjunction with partner providers. I think the point you're making in terms of being a post-occupancy or post-project evaluation is actually a very sensible one. We certainly have models in terms of how we would do that, and I'd appreciate you allowing us to do that. I think you're right, it probably now's the time to do that in terms of informing lessons learned, and we'd already started that discussion about how do we review the 600 hours programme, how successful has it been, and what can we learn in building for the 1140. So I think we'd welcome that opportunity. But what we'll do is we'll take the 600 hours strategy, which was agreed by committee, we'll show you the implementation, and we'll do a review against that original strategy to say, has it been delivered against, and what are the added values, benefits, and how we can learn from that. In terms of staffing, I think you're right to point out it's a very complex model which colleagues are involved with. That's why we have a vast range internally. We have a multidisciplinary team, and Jonathan's leading up in staffing and understanding all the potential opportunities but challenges that brings. So again, that'll be one of the work streams alongside the revenue implications, alongside the capital, that we will keep bringing to committee. And it was important we established this report here today to say this is what we're doing, this is the baseline to get your guidance and insight. And then, as we said, we want to give you regular update reports on all the work streams that we're having to look at to deliver this very complex strategy, and also minded that will keep developing as we get more guidance and support from government and direction about what we're to do.
Ted, I think you wanted in about the funding.
Yes, just on the point raised by Councillor Ferguson. The point I was actually trying to make is that there was apparently a reduction in the capital funding. I appreciate that there has been an increase in revenue, but that was something that I expected to happen in line with capital funding. So I hope that clarifies that for you, Councillor Ferguson.
Right to reply, thank you very much. The 49.6 didn't actually set out there exactly what the spread was. So the first phase, absolutely, yeah, 49. The whole thing, that was the first phase as well. Right, we're not getting a bun fight, this is kids' education we're talking about.
Okay, if we can move on. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Paragraph 3.2 tells us that there is currently provision for over 3,000 children. ELC is an entitlement. Are we aware of the number of children, if any, who do not take up the entitlement?
Imagine there is, but
It's a difficult one because we're relying on data from NHS and other parties, particularly in the 2-year-old. It's been very difficult to identify. So I think a safe thing to say is to go back and we'll speak with colleagues, but currently we didn't have a defined number of people that are not choosing to take it, because as I say, we're relying on effectively NHS data to tell us where the children are, who they are, and obviously the responsibility lies with the parents to contact our service to indicate a willingness or want for that service. So it is a bit of a challenging area for us.
It would certainly be useful from a planning perspective to have an approximate idea how many children there are in that category.
Chair, just to say that in previous reports, certainly for 3 and 4-year-olds, we were up around 99% is my recollection. I couldn't say specifically that's where we are just now, nor could we be as clear about the 2-year-olds, but all of the indications were that we've got a very, very high uptake around 3 and 4-year-olds, and that 2-year-olds were above the national average. So if that reassures members, but we will follow up to check what we can. Okay.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. I think Claire will know where I'm coming from with this one, but will we be giving consideration as we're putting this together, developing it, and potentially for the further update in March, to situations where we may have displaced a provider from accommodation, admittedly not through any doing of their own? I recognise that that creates a particularly complicated situation. There's the one that I know about and colleagues in Abbey Ward are very, very well familiar with. I'm not sure that it's the only one at the moment, and I suspect that it may not be the only one in future. I mean, we have papers about low utilisation coming up and various other things. I just want to maybe get a feel for the extent to which we're having a look at that and trying to factor it in.
Welcome you bringing that to the attention again, thank you. So yes, we're aware of potentially 3 displaced providers as a result of the wider strategic projects. We are mindful of the service that they offer to their communities and how much they're valued in their communities, and we want to support them within our levels of responsibility in the council. Obviously, we would not, and it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be seen to favouritising anybody over anybody else. You know, partner providers have all got to be given the same and consistent support, and we've had that raised with us from other providers to make sure that's happening. Mindful that it is always a challenging situation where a business has got to look at a new premises or a big change. We have offered support and assistance consistently with the 3 cases in terms of giving them guidance as to their options and suggestions. But again, I'm mindful not to overstep the mark that they are autonomous businesses. We can provide, suggest, support, and we're doing that because this is a council, this is a community benefit that could potentially be realised and transferred to another setting, and that the community might be interested in other assets or offerings we could have to help continuation of that service. So I know in that specific location you're talking about, we've given an extension of time in terms of the property to give them that space to look at it. We've also given them support in terms of reviewing their accommodation needs and what they might want and mapping on other assets. And we've offered that for North West Dumfries in terms of another provider in that area as well. The third provider's not completely engaged with us yet. So just to give members reassurance, we are aware. We have procedures in place now. We are providing support. But just to note that that support will be consistent with any provider that needs our support to make sure that it is fair, open and transparent.
It takes an opportunity to add, thank you, Chair, that the recent internal audit report, which will come in front of members of Policy and Resources, highlights strong and robust payments to our partner providers through the NAM system, and all of those recommendations from 2 years ago have been overtaken. So we're delighted with that, and the only area for action is consistency on the point that you highlight. So that will certainly be part of the internal audit action plan.
I'll say you want to back in.
Well, before I say what I was going to say, I'm glad that the NAM system seems to be settling down. Chairman, in view of the tenor of the debate, I hope that I get consensus on my proposal at 2.5 to make a small addition. 7 words after the officers, in full consultation with the commissioned providers, which would mean that the paragraph would then read, provide comment on the national project delivery timelines for 1140 hours and agree for officers in full consultation with the commission providers to further develop local plans in response to this as detailed in paragraph 3.5. Thank you.
Claire, you want to comment?
If I'm allowed to, we note, I would say from an officer's perspective, we note that, but what I would suggest, if you're defining one interested party, there's a lot of interested parties, including parents and other sectors of the community. And I'm just wondering to say, should one interested key party have precedent over another? I would like to think that we are challenged and we act on engaging with all, consulting with all interested parties.
Yeah, I think that is important that we recognise that it's important for parents and youngsters and others. I'm not quite sure how we phrase it. Could say in consultation with interested parties.
I would be happy to take that on board, Chair, if it's not a form of words in full consultation with.
The important thing is the consultation with everyone. Yep. Okay. I've got no more speakers. Oh, Andy?
Just the one thing, Chair. I'm wondering if we put another recommendation in as well, and I appreciate the commitment from Claire and the senior officer team there to report back on the implementation of the 600 hours and that. But given that that will probably be coming back to a different committee, potentially different members, can we actually incorporate that into the recommendations so that it's clear and it's seen, and there's no, when whoever's going to be here after May, I know very clearly what we intended.
Yep, very happy with that. I would suggest maybe something along the lines of agree that officers are to do a post-project evaluation of 600 hours to make sure that lessons learned are fed into the 1140 programme and report it back to committee.
It does say in 2.8 to receive regular updates. I think it's a question of how regular the updates are going to be. I don't know whether you ought to bring an update to each of the meetings of STIPL. Depends on how quickly things are moving.
I think it's likely to be very regular, I think quarterly, but I would reserve the right to might even be more regular depending on A, frequency of committees, but B, what happens with government and directions, you know.
Possibly not wishing to commit ourselves to any future or commit any future STIPL committee, but we could have it as a standing item on the agenda. It is so important to our young people in order to make sure this does achieve what it's set out to achieve. Okay, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. Agree that a further report comes to the March committee. And 2.7, that officers present an update report of March committee regarding the details of phase 1 and the funding requirements set out in paragraph 3.6. And 2.8, to have this as a standing item effectively to all meetings of the STIPL committee in the future. Okay, thank you, members. If we move on to item 5, which starts on page 31, and this is an update on work in relation to low utilisation schools. Claire, is there anything you want to add to the report?
Yes, if that was okay. Obviously, low utilisation is a very key thing, and it's a very sensitive area which we're mindful of. Committee agreed the principle of reviewing this and being proactive as a council and working with communities and users about schools low utilisation. And just for a reminder, there's 25 that we're challenged to work with that were below 50% occupancy. This is the report, and I think it is important that we are consistent with giving reports to committee, because it is a moving feast, as we can see. There has been movement in terms of schools, in terms of moving on and off the list, and we appreciate the sensitivity with that. And we've obviously had feedback from elected members in the school, and obviously the press have picked it up as well. I think we're sensitive to that, and just to say we've got a commitment to work with the communities and understanding what that means, because I appreciate when they go onto the list there's a nervousness about what that means. But just to reassure members, it's very clear it's about low utilisation and looking at all the options to make a school sustainable. That is absolutely our message and report, and I've been out to, I think, 4 meetings this week about it. So we're very clear that it's about reassuring people and empowering people about what that means. So that's the item under 3.8. Under 3.5.9 under Springfield, just to clarify that since the report was written, we have had an interest from a local housing developer in terms of affordable housing at a potential site there. So elected members were very keen that I was clear on that one. And I think just the wider context, we are being proactive, we are being engaged, getting very good discussions in terms of communities considering and evaluating what their education means to them. I would also say that we're being proactive as officers. That's why I'm part of the early years programme, because it's not just one stream. We've got to look at the whole aspect about making a school sustainable, about utilising council assets more effectively. We are working very effectively across the council to review resource requirements across the directorate to see how can we better use our buildings. I'm also on the housing development subcommittee now as well, so working with local housing developers and associations to see how can we best use or direct developments to these areas to support rural communities and small schools. But happy to take any questions, which I know is a very key area for members.
Ed?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report, but I think it's important to follow up on what Claire said and to emphasise that it is part of a monitoring exercise which is meant to optimise the education experience for our young people and to give them the best opportunities in life, and not as reported in some sections of the media as a precursor for school closures. So I think it's important that that message gets across. Thank you.
As Claire said, the object of this is sustainability. It's not closure. It is how we sustain these schools within our communities. Oh, Dennis, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Along the same lines, and Springfield was mentioned, and I mean, that's what happened there, that people suddenly got upset and they thought their school was under threat. And we've tried, as councillors, obviously, to convince them they've not. So what has happened, as well as this possible provider of housing coming forward, along with Archie and Craig, we've had several meetings with planning and with housing providers and with the community to assure them this is not a precursor to closing the school. But what I think it certainly has done is awakened the community, because we have a strange situation with Gretna half a mile away and 600 houses planned for the Gretna area. That means under planning there will be people going to have to pay extra to build their house. Whilst in Springfield, half a mile away, there is capacity in the school and houses could be built there, which then takes that capacity up. So it is being worked on, and I'm pleased Claire has recognised the fact that there now is one provider probably going to look to build housing as a way forward, and we can actually convince the community that that's what's happening. Because the big fear is, and we've seen it happen elsewhere, that the families start to vote with their feet and they actually move their children to another school and they create a situation which closes the school. We saw it happen at Herla, Evertown, and I would hate to see that happen elsewhere in places like Springfield, where if Gretna overflows, then Springfield is obviously going to be the natural choice to take that overflow as well. So it's a strange situation, but I'm pleased she's brought it up, and we are, I think, all working together hard to convince the community that there is a way forward in this and that the future is quite rosy, actually.
I think it is a very good report, and it does show how close we are monitoring this, and also the changes in the housing, and the fact that it is a very fluid situation. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. So Teresa's, it's the second lowest, and we know historically what the problem's been. Just for clarity, Claire, I've got in my own mind, the 224 capacity, is that for the entire building, or is that for the school as is down below? Doesn't include where the council offices are added onto that.
I confirm it does not include the council offices. It's purely the education accommodation which St Teresa's has access to.
Thanks, Chair. The worrying thing I find coming from the consultation with the low utilisation schools is the significantly high number of children being educated out with their catchment. You know, you with a school there, 18 pupils out with the catchment, another one, 17 pupils out with the catchment. I don't know how we convince parents that their nearest school will provide a perfectly good education for their children. This to me is a very worrying thing. In times of austerity, the fact that we still maintain a choice of school, parental choice, I don't know if it's sustainable or not.
It's a very difficult item, and we hear quite strong voices from small schools in relation to that point. Obviously, as an authority, we've got to respect our responsibilities under the 1980 Act in terms of parental choice. It's also been respectful that parents choose from a number of reasons. It might be childcare, it might be workplacing, so there's a wide-ranging issues. But you're right in terms of our responsibilities to provide a consistent educational and accessible educational experience that parents and communities hopefully want to choose and access. And certainly as part of the engagement that we are doing at the moment, we're having these discussions and that understanding to say, why aren't parents choosing their catchment schools? What can we do to support that, to try and help find sustainable solutions to support local communities?
Can I add something there, Chair? So recognising what Claire's saying there in terms of parental choice, there's legislation and we need to adhere to that. But the one thing that we do have a little bit of authority over is our own policy around costs when people apply to go out with catchment. And I suppose from that point of view, it would always be helpful to us if appeals panels, for example, held up the policy of the council if we want to try to minimise that challenge.
George?
Firstly, I welcome the proactive approach that the officers are taking. I think it's essential. Dumfries and Galloway Parents Forum have had a couple of quite lengthy discussions on small schools, big schools, and the conclusion that certainly the Dumfries and Galloway Parents Forum, which is fairly well represented, is that we need to look at this more strategically. There's times where emotion can overrule rational forward strategy, and given the budgetary constraints, the Dumfries and Galloway Parents Forum are open to a constructive discussion on how best to utilise the school roles, the school space. So we welcome that, and we really would encourage you to take the broader scope. Often a consultation in a small school closing is very much concentrated in that small school, in that community, and I think there should be a wider context sometimes to these things, and clearly it's emotive, and if you're involved with it, sometimes it becomes a lobbying process rather than rational thinking, what's best for the children and the parents of that school. On the subject of parental choice, I'm not being glib here, but the challenge is to get all schools as good as the other, and for all schools to collaborate to ensure that not only is their school good, but their neighbouring schools are just as good. And that's up to head teachers and parents to not to try and be better than the next school, but if they've got something good going in their school, they share it with the next school, so that every school offers the same opportunities to the children, and then there'll be far less folk considering appeals.
I would add something to that again, if I might, Chair. Again, to reassure members that an absolutely key plank of the education strategy is around collaboration, has been for a number of years. That's exemplified in places like Dumfries Learning Town, Network East, our clusters working closely together in partnership schools. So a really big focus has been collaboration rather than competition.
Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. The first one, Springfield 3.5.9. I see that the local ward members were consulted or were talked to about the situation there. I wondered if there was anything specific there, because I did actually hear the officer regarding school in my ward, Carlavrock, but that was only accidental because I happened to be at the school council meeting. So I wondered if there was some specific to that particular school. I mean, it seemed to me that if you're going to talk about these schools with communities, you should involve the elected members. That's my first point. I don't know if... Yes.
You're absolutely right. Elected members, local board members are actually key to that. Carlaverick, we did put an email out at an early stage to say we're going in to have discussions with the school, and the schools are charged to invite the elected members as part of the parent council forum that we go to. I appreciate that doesn't always happen, and we've certainly encouraged that, and where we can, we try and put out, we don't have a locus to put invites, but we sort of say, well, we're going down to see this school that night. Are you aware of that meeting? So we try and encompass elected members like we did with Kinner and Garliston as well. I appreciate it's not 100% perfect, but we'll make sure we do better.
Thank you. My second point was I actually have a list of schools that have preschool nurseries, and I did a wee exercise, and if you look at all the 26 schools that are below the 49% of utilisation, as shown on page 35, I found out that 20 out of these 26 do not have any nurseries, either local authority or a private one in the vicinity. Now, it seems to me that that would be a useful way of something to consider regarding utilisation. It would buttress the school in terms of parents' work patterns, and often the reason why they take their child to some other school is because it fits in with their work pattern and they cannot leave the child or children at the local school. So I would urge, when you come back with your report in 2018, to have taken that on board as a way of utilising the spare capacity.
Absolutely noted and agree with that. In the last paper we took to committee, we detailed all the options that would go in and speak to school with, and one of them was about the early years, and could the early years be accommodated to help create a sustainable environment. So as many that we've got schools that are not thriving, we've got without nurseries, we've got schools that are thriving without nurseries, so you have both balances. So it's not a precursor to say that if a school doesn't have a nursery then it's not thriving. That's not the case. What we are doing is looking for demand. So we're looking at Carlaverick, and we looked at Carlaverick to map out, say, can we create some sort of early year setting? We're speaking with private partner providers to see if we can create an interest there. The challenge will be down to demand. You know, if we still can only identify that there's 3 or 4 children, then we'll be coming back to elect members to say that in terms of staffing ratios and affordability in that we still can't make it work. But we are looking at that option to see if it helps us in providing some solutions for these utilisation. And certainly in part of the early years programme and mapping on our capacity, the preferential option is where we've got capacity in a school and we can create a nursery at school, because it means we're not building extra estates. So it's absolutely a priority for us to see if we can make that happen.
Yeah, I think obviously very much ties in with the earlier item 4, doesn't it, in terms of early years provision. But no one else looking to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, and agree to receive a further report back to this committee in 2018 with an update? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 6. And this is Claire again, and you're going to give us a film show. So this is Dumfries Learning Town project update, the bridge. Okay, Claire?
Sorry that it's me again. I'll try and hurry up and get off the stage. As with the other projects, Dalbeattie and the Dumfries Learning Town projects, we came to committee to ask for delegated authority to go ahead and sign the contracts. What we want to do today is to present the designs to you so you can see the most updated versions of how the bridge has continued to develop. And you know, it is a continuing process. Consultation is very much key for us with users, with community, with other potential providers. You know, making some really nice progress in terms of engagement about hospitality, learning a lot from the inspiring learning spaces from Wallace Hall, and things like the green room and technology, but acknowledging that this this project does, should and will continue to evolve. And I think it's important that members get to see what this product is before you hopefully give us delegated authority for calling at the appropriate time to sign and allow us to progress with this item. So the bridge, the bridge is the hub, is the game changer with Dumfries Learning Town in terms of bringing a new type of learning experience that not only will our children, our young people, but all our communities will benefit from. It is in a visible, accessible location, so going from Dumfries, but on the wider regional accessibility as well, on the King George V site, just off the A75, A76, so really accessible, adjacent to the Queen of the South activity, which again is hugely complementary to potentially what we can get out of the bridge. So you're looking at the main foyer there in terms of what you're going to see as you come in. As much as this is about the form of the building, it is about the function. It's actually about what happens in there. It's not about creating an architectural monument and spending the money in that. It's about putting the money inside it, about where we're going to get value added. So we're looking at the site adjacent to Glasgow Road, adjacent to, as I say, the Queen of the South activity in King George V, and that gives you a sense of the scale or the part of that site that we'll be developing. It is an area of scrubland that was a former bowling green, so we're regenerating a part of Dumfries which is not effectively used just now. But again, it's very visible, and that is key. It's about that's what's possible. It's about catching people's eye, and it's also about giving another go-to destination to say, right, okay, you're dropping your kid off at King George V. Can we get an adult back in there to do some sort of learning, some sort of activity? It's about a child, maybe a senior-faced child who's maybe disenfranchised. It's about creating that excitement. It's also about creating accessibility to all our Dumfries schools. We've done a lot of mapping. Vanessa's done a huge amount of work in terms of accessibility, sustainable travel plans, working with colleagues across the council on that. This is the front elevation that you look on. Again, it's got to be, we're looking at something very simple because it's about creating that fenestration, the windows to actually showcase about what's going on inside, and then at night really lighting it up and making it alive. So again, it becomes something exciting. It's a go-to that people want to see. These are the elevations. Again, this should all be familiar because this is very similar to the product that we're showing you before. So again, very simple because it's about showcasing what you see through those windows and about spending the money inside so that our users get the benefit. And going in terms of what are we creating in here? So the front entrance, and I'm sorry the pointer's not working. To the bottom of the screen, you're seeing the entrance. You're coming in. You've got that cafe exhibition. So you've got that sort of come in for a coffee. The people that are maybe scared, intimidated, don't have that confidence to come in. It's about giving them that sense of just come in for a coffee and see what's happening. It's not that scary. And then you've got the theatre forum at the heart, which is allowing our children and young people to showcase what they're doing and translating it into something for the community, for audiences, but actually getting other conferences in, getting people, getting businesses in there. Going round from the right side, we've got the hospitality and the professional kitchen there. And again, that's really building on the experiences at Dalbeattie, at Wallace Hall, and also working with the college to say, how can we showcase and get people excited about hospitality? I had a really nice conversation with an S2 girl, quite a challenging background, and it's quite emotional about how important this is. This girl, has lost her mum and that, but the hospitality experience that we're giving her at Wallace Hall now is getting her excited about school again. And it's just really nice to hear a young person say, I'm really excited about my learning, and it's helping her deal with some other issues that she's dealing with in her life. So we're sort of putting the hospitality catering there. So it's about getting the both. So it's getting real life experiences to support the hospitality, the tourism in our region, but also using that as a facility to say, right, okay, so we've got a forum, a conference on the theatre, then they could provide the catering. It's a real life experience. We've seen that working well down at Dalbeattie. We've got BOSS, which is the service that will transfer from Ellen Vale. So it's about behavioural issues with our secondary age children, providing them a base to say, actually, okay, so you're needing some support. The support should come in your pastoral school, but we acknowledge that there's maybe different journeys, different opportunities that we want to engage you back into education. You've got the top of the screen, so you've got your automotive and design engineering. Again, taking it a step up to create, automotive is a lot about, it's electrical, digital these days. It's also about showing our children and young people that these are not necessarily just your vocational pathways. This is about saying, well, if you did your mathematics, you did your hires, actually you could do digital technology in relation to automotive. It's about giving blended and different career opportunities. And then coming down to the left-hand side, we've got our Learning Zone and Design Lab. So it's about creating creative and spaces like the enterprise, which will be owned by the children and young people. They'll come in and do their thing in there. And then we're creating that stage, that proscenium experience to the rear of it, to say we're trying to keep it as multifunctional as possible. As you see, there's lots of sort of peekaboo points in terms of being able to see through, because it's also about bringing our early years and our primary children in. Now, obviously, we couldn't, for health and safety reasons, put them straight on in a full-on production kitchen, but they could see that space to say, wow, that looks exciting, and give them a sense of what's possible, but also making the spaces of sufficient size. Like, we know a primary class is 31, so we need to make sure, sorry, 33, so we need to make sure that we can get our children in these spaces because it's going to be compliant. Oh, so am I going the wrong way? Yeah. So that's really where we are in terms of what we're doing and where the project's developed to. We're waiting on planning, considering it at the moment, in terms of there's been no major objections, so that's good. And we're really at the stage now where we're getting the stage 2 document in, which is the key contractual document, and needing elected members to give us that delegated authority to progress to financial close in conjunction with the other work streams which are detailed in the paper. And we'd like to think we'll be getting started on this on site this year. So really exciting, game changer, very visible. You know, it ties into what we're seeing at Dalbeattie, North West and St Joseph's. People are getting excited because things are actually happening on the ground. It is real now, and that's helping us have some really interesting and exciting discussions with schools and teaching staff and single subject offering across the borough. So it's just part of the programme which elected members have seen, and it's the next stage forward. So happy to take any questions on that.
Questions on the presentation, Ted?
It's not so much a question, it's actually just a comment. Thanks very much, Claire, for that excellent high-speed presentation on what is a very, very exciting development, and gives a pathway to vocational training, placing it on the same status as academic qualifications, not only for our young people, but also gives an opportunity for adult learners to actually continue developing their lives. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. Councillor McClung's vanished, so we were giggling. Can't wait to see the grand piano with the man in tails. I think that's a fantastic addition. Can we have a jazz bar with cocktails as well, please? But no, great presentation. I asked the question about the grand piano.
Thanks very much. Just to add to Ted, it's actually the passion came across as well, and that was very nice to see. Just one wee thing for accuracy, at 3.7, it kind of gives the impression that the whole site was coming good. It was part of the site was coming good.
Can we put that on hold and then we'll move on to the paper?
Okay, right, yeah.
So moving on to the document, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. It should be straightforward. As I say, it's part of what's already been signed off by committee in terms of Dumfries Learning Town. It's consistent with the approach we've taken with other projects, and we would welcome elected members' support.
Okay, Andy.
Thanks very much. I'll just obviously repeat what I said. At 3.7, it kind of gives the impression that the whole site came to common good. In fact, it was quite a small part of the site. The rest already belong to the council. And given this has got to be a historical document, maybe we need to share that, because we didn't want in 20 years' time or 30 years' time some challenge to say this ground belongs to common good and quote this committee paper. It's just a technical point, but other than that, I'm happy to go with the recommendations.
Yeah, it's good to see 3.9 about the development of the Land Reform Act, which obviously will make it simpler. Portobello, I know there was a huge amount of problems there in terms of the common good, etc. So that actually, I think, had to go to the Scottish Parliament. So hopefully we will be on site and constructing on the 27th of March. Fingers crossed. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, just to echo the remarks made in terms of Claire's presentation, and really good presentation. Could I maybe take licence and say to Claire, if she maybe changed the bridge to the street, we may have an answer for Stranraer Academy.
I'm sure that's noted. George?
Yeah, just for a wee bit of detail, I know you've got limited time. What would be your target customer, if for want of a better description? And secondly, what sort of capacity do you have?
So I guess the sort of simple response to that is looking at expanding the experience for our secondary users and working as a networking opportunity along with their pastoral bases to provide that experience. But we are committed, and the design has progressed to be accessible and to attract primary, early years and our adult users in the community. So it is a multi-purpose facility, deliberately so. In terms of capacity, the theoretical technical design capacity is 326, but that'll depend on what activity is happening at any one time. You know, if you've got a conference and banqueting where people are standing in that main space, you can significantly increase the capacity of that facility. But if you've got all the children and young people in the technical space, that'll stick it more around the 326. So it has got that flexibility, and again, that building is deliberately designed like that.
And you might lack of knowledge here, but would people be there full time, or would they be coming from schools, you know, temporarily using the facilities and coming in and out?
It's not designed to be a full-time facility.
Right, okay.
It's deliberately aspect. It's that addition, that's enhancement of the learning. And you know, part of this experience is about coming between schools, meeting different people, managing time, managing transport. So the whole experience of getting to the bridge and being part of a wider network of learning centres across Dumfries is to support that resilience and stamina.
My last question, and pardon me for being parochial, but the experience you get from that, presumably it'll benefit the east and the west, etc.
Absolutely. We see the value in what we've developed and created here. You know, as I mentioned, we've obviously got the Centre for Upper Nithsdale at Walshall. We're working with British Thornton at Sanquhar. Colin's mentioned about Network East. Again, there's some really good opportunities about networking and looking at stewardship and looking at the West to say, how can we develop? And a bit like the early solution, everything is relevant for that geographical locale. One size does not fit all, and we have to be respectful of that and look at opportunities.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, could I add something, Chair? Thanks. I don't want to be too cliched here, but it is a long journey, and it's part of a long journey. And I think what Claire presented was excellent, but that would just be initially what we might see when we open up. The Dumfries Borough Review probably started 40 years ago, certainly. The current Borough Review started about 8 years ago, and this is we're still actually at the early stages of what that might eventually look like. We do think that at the initial stages, this is about trying to look at our schools and how they can most benefit. But certainly I'm very keen on looking at the community planning side of it, the ability to attract other partners, to really begin to tap into that agenda, and also then to look into how we might benefit the rest of the region. So it's a long journey. We're very optimistic about it, but we need to recognise we start off at one stage with the schools in the first instance.
I think it is important to emphasise, this isn't just an education facility for school-age youngsters. It's to enable people to come back into retraining, etc., and to build the confidence that they can. If you haven't made the most of the opportunities when you're at school, that isn't the end of your chances, effectively. It's just to a certain extent the start if you want to change careers, etc. So it is going to be much more flexible than we've had in the past. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. You alluded to the Portobello situation in Edinburgh, which I'm familiar with because I've got a relative who lives right next to it. It was a nasty, long, protracted affair which went through the court session. However, I would like to think in terms of paragraph 3.9 that there has been a change in the law, and hopefully, although it's always a tricky one to prejudge what the judiciary is going to say, I presume we have more confidence that we won't be saddled with the problems that Edinburgh City Council had.
I think just in terms of the common good, it shouldn't be ossified. What better use could you make of the common good than to build a facility such as this, which is for all the people of Dumfries and out with the town itself. So could we move to the... Oh, sorry, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just regarding the recommendations, I take it the last figure in the last recommendation should be 3.3, no 3.6. 3.3 gives you the fund
the 3.6 just says cost being within the agreed funding allocations. It's 3.3 that gives you the cost of 10.51 million.
And make sure that's changed. Okay, so with that change noted, can we note 2.1, agree 2.2, which we already had, and agree to delegate authority to the Director and Head of Legal and Democratic Services to execute the contract. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 7. This obviously isn't a purely educational issue, therefore the non-elected members are perfectly entitled, or quite happy for you to stay to listen to this, but obviously you've got no input at this stage. Again, it's Mark and Richard who present this. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
Just very briefly, 3 points, if I may, Chair. The papers brought before members in order to implement decisions taken by Council in February and March of last year, and significantly the move to the commissioning model based on delivering the Council's priorities and commitments. Critically, Chair, the commissions that have been developed and presented to members today have been done so within the cash limit budget made available to us from this committee on the 12th of December. And finally, in regard to consultation, just to give members assurance that since the December committee, Mark's worked really hard with the current recipients of the grants to develop and influence the outcomes of the commissions that have been presented to members today for consideration. So happy to answer any detailed questions, Chair.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I hear what's been said about working hard with the ones that actually deliver them at the minute. That's Galloway Youth, YMCA Dumfries and LGBT Youth Scotland. And to support, as far as the YMCA Dumfries, to support development youth work in the YMCAs across the region and provide youth work services in Sederunt Dumfries. YMCA Dumfries do not supply any youth services in Sederunt. Sederunt YMCA does. So therefore my question would be, given that it's Sederunt YMCA that supply the services, why were they not involved in the 2 meetings regarding the process for the commissioning and actual to discuss the Youth Work Commission and jointly develop the outcomes in the commissions? Because this is Sederunt YMCA I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Dumfries.
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. The organisations that were invited to the meeting were the 3 organisations that are in current receipt of third sector grants. Currently, it's Dumfries YMCA who are the recipient of the third sector grant, and within that there is a SLA between Dumfries YMCA and Sederunt YMCA for the delivery of youth work within the Sederunt area, but the current grant is with Dumfries YMCA and not directly with the council and Sederunt YMCA. But what assurances that I had with Dumfries YMCA was that it was vital for us that they engage with Sederunt YMCA in terms of moving forward with the outcomes, and I got those reassurances from the organisation that Sederunt was engaged fully through the discussions with Dumfries YMCA.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks for that. So the position of the council is Sederunt YMCA have really got nothing to do with this, even though they're actually providing the service. And as regarding the assurances that the YMCA and Dumfries gave you about Sederunt YMCA being fully involved, the project coordinator at Sederunt only knew about this 1 week ago. So how's that for consultation?
Yeah, I will be happy to go back to Dumfries YMCA, that's the current holder of the grant, and I've also had that. I did have that reassurance from them, but I can go back and find out more details for that for members. But although Sederunt YMCA are the ones who deliver within Sederunt, that goes back to the contract and grant currently is with Dumfries YMCA.
Yeah, Chair. What I really want to know is what are we doing about the rest of the region, because this is fairly disjointed and really doesn't cover Dumfries and Galloway and youth services. While there are a lot of other organisations out there delivering youth work in different forums, we don't seem to be doing anything at all to encourage or help them. We've got 3 here. This could be 12. And I mean, there used to be a youth service that ran right across the region that used to deliver. So I just wondered what we're doing and how we're going to get to the point of making sure there's equality across the region.
Yeah, I'd agree with the member that it's important about equity of provision across the region. I think what's important is that we're moving to a commissioning process. So although the report references the 3 current organisations that are in receipt of third sector grants, that they have to go through essentially a competitive tender process through the procurement system in terms of whether they would then be the organisation that receives that commission. But in terms of the wider support to the youth work sector across the region, this committee will remember in its September meeting there was a strategic plan approved around delivery of youth work services across the region, which was for the first time about us actually looking at making sure we had consistency across the region, and I'm delighted now that as a council service we are starting to make inroads with that. But the Commission, specifically in relation to training, support and development of third sector youth groups, is because of the importance that we place within that delivery of third sector to complement our council delivery of youth work services, and very much working on a collaborative approach. And that commission is specifically about supporting and offering training and development opportunities for all the youth organisations across Dumfries and Galloway, so that we can maximise what that money for that commission does across the region.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief question. It's just to get a clear understanding myself. Do we put forward the 3 tenders and what's involved in those tenders, and then hope that third sector organisations will bid into it, or do we specifically go to those 3 organisations and say this is what we want delivered? Because I need to be assured that the 3 organisations that have got these tenders are the 3 best for that job. Were others given the opportunity to look at the tender profile and potentially, bid in for that tender and offer their services?
The plan is, if members agree this today, that we would go out to a tender process in the coming weeks. So we haven't entered the tender process yet. What we are asking members today to do is agree what the commissions are, which are noted in the report, and that would then be offered to any organisation in Dumfries and Galloway to then tender for that. And as part of that, we're working with procurement service about making sure there's a robust scoring mechanism within that, so that we absolutely make sure we get the maximum out of this process, and also make sure that the organisations, are experienced youth work providers that can provide the best quality of service for our young people across the region.
There's 3 organisations being specifically named, so it almost seems as if there's a preference to utilise them to deliver that particular project again, or to continue it. And I think that possibly sends out the wrong message to other organisations who could be, equally as good, if not better, at delivering that particular tender. I think, just because we've named those 3, there is a presumption now that those 3 will get those 3 tenders, and I'm not terribly comfortable with that. But the report is as it is.
Yeah, I can give you the reassurance that those organisations would be on an equal footing with any other organisation that would tender. The reason they are referred to specifically within the report is that when members agreed that the council would move to a commissioning process last year, members were very keen that there was a co-production element of that with the current recipients of third sector grants. So those organisations jointly develop the outcomes in terms of the expertise they bring to the table, but they would now be subject to the full tender process along with any other organisation.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I think I asked Mark and Richard when they made their presentation to the subcommittee, the restructuring subcommittee, about capacity and capability. And there's been reference made this morning in terms of consistency and coordinated way in dealing across the region. And, I'm looking at the commissioning, and that we put in what is in the brief here in the appendix. And one of them is keeping our communities safe. I'm just using this as an example, that we cover the broad spectrum of what we require from the Commission. And I'm looking at antisocial behaviour, young people perhaps with that regard there is nothing to do in terms of occupying their time in a more energetic, or putting their energies into other things. Have we got the capacity and capabilities within the Commission to deliver across the region and not just rely on a mobile unit moving up and down or whatever it is?
I think what we tried to do in developing these commissions was look at, in terms of the available budget we had, what is realistic to expect to deliver these, so that we're focusing on the outcomes that each of these commissions would develop for young people. And the idea was that that the report that members approved at this committee in December in terms of the outcomes for the service review for services for young people, one of the key outcomes of that review was about provision of services, in some of our more rural areas, and as well as that within our areas of multiple deprivation, and that the commissions were developed around those outcomes to make sure that if you like, we're confident that those organisations can deliver locally and also meet the outcomes that members wanted to see as part of that service review.
Andy?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a couple of things. Just for clarity, is your definition of commission full cost recovery? If we commission a service to do something, it's on a full cost recovery basis. That should actually be the cost of delivering the service we commission from them, the amount of money that's set aside. Is that your view, Mark?
Yeah, we would expect the organisations who bid for this to be able to deliver on the outcomes and covering their costs. However, we would encourage organisations always potentially to then use this grant money to complement it with with additional grant, potentially use the council money that would go to those organisations to bring in other grants to the region as well. And I think it's important that we we work to that principle, but at the same time, what we would be asking organisations to do is look in this in terms of what can they deliver for the volume of money that we can provide.
Thanks very much for letting me back in. What were the costs of the original SLAs? It's 44,000 now for the 3 commission services. What was the cost for the SLAs before this committee made a decision in December to slash that budget?
I don't have those figures to hand, Councillor Ferguson, but I can provide them to you under separate cover.
Okay, that's unfortunate. My worry here is we've got a deck of cards just waiting to crumble, because how many of the organisations that we're talking about here, never mind other organisations who might be prepared to tender for this, the current organisations, I'm just doing some basic maths here, and it's roughly 36 hours a week for a £16,000 commission. How is that any one of these 3 organisations, and that's going to deliver a region-wide service on 36 hours a week, and that doesn't include any add-on costs whatsoever? No transport costs, no national insurance cost, nothing. So how are, we're effectively asking people to bid in for a pot of money here, probably out of, I'm loath to use the word, but they've no, if this is the only funding available for them, they will grab what they can, and then we're left with a disaster, because it will be sustainable. And I think that's the worry for me. And I'm talking about all these 3 organisations or anybody else who comes in here, and it's the knock-on effect. How many of these organisations are dependent on the SLA, for example, as it was, to then attract other funding from other sources, right, beforehand? Because if they don't have that, how are they going to go forward? For example, I'll give you an example. Hollywood Trust is probably supporting all 3 of these, right? Is their funding dependent on reasonable funding and core funding coming from the council? If it is, then they're going to take 1 week of that and say, well, 16k is not enough for core funding for any of these organisations. And I suppose we're reaping what we sowed here at the last committee, because this is the knock-on effect with that massive cut in the December decision. But we can revisit that. We are where we are.
Director.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose Mark might have something to add to this around trying to make sure that all organisations are trying to access various fundings from various places and work together quite carefully, and we recognise the challenge here. What I would say is that I think this committee looked in December and looked at the context of potentially 16 to 20 million pound savings to be had. It looks a little bit lower now, but it's still a massive challenge for the council coming up. And in the context of the expected delivery of savings from previously agreed service reviews. And in the back of that, when the committee made the decision in December around the service review, really officers have just taken that decision forward and created the commissions around that. And that's the context in which we've been working.
And also, we are in the budget process, so it's up to any group if they want to increase funding to any particular part of the council organisation to do so. Do you want to come in on that? Yep.
If I might, Chair, thank you. Yes, I understand. Well, I used to understand the budget process, although I do remember Colin Smith correcting my proposal in front of my eyes one year, which was slightly embarrassing. But we've made a decision in December about this, where actually the alternative was saying, why don't we do it as part of the budget process, where how many days we are away from fixing a budget, the circumstances have changed in a way that perhaps the leader knew about yesterday morning, but certainly the rest of us did not, and perhaps no one did. How do the two decisions go together? I mean, can the budget override the decision of December? Because we seem to always get one or two different opinions on that.
I'm not
all right,
totally sure
let me try that one again. We decided in December that we weren't going to wait until the budget. We're going to take the decision which led to these commissions. You're now saying that actually in the budget we could do something else, irrespective of the decision that we were made. I mean, irrespective of the decision, apparently, what we're saying is on the 28th, we could put something in a budget, any group could put something in a budget saying, we're not going to do that, even though we made the decision in December and are being asked to agree commissions today. Is that right?
Chair, I'm not a governance expert, but I would suggest that the difference between the two things that you're speaking about is, I would imagine, at budget setting on the 29th of February, where any party decided to put in additional finance for any area, that would be seen as policy development funding, as opposed to overturning previous decisions.
I'm really sorry to labour the point. It's perhaps that I'm full of cold medication and I'm more than usually slow this morning. So we agree the commissions this morning, and on the 28th of February, we might do something different, or we might not. But supposing we do something different then, what happens to the commissions between now and the 28th of February? And more importantly, to the groups, the organisations that might be wishing to tender for them.
The current organisations and then reassurance give you is that they're in receipt of third sector grants to the 31st of March, and we would be moving to a procurement process that would then be completed prior to that. So in terms of the current organisations, they are in grant receipt until the end of March.
Thanks for letting me back in, Chair. I was one of the members that pushed to have things go forward in December to allow you to build up the commissions and start to take that process forward, and I felt that was really important. I do think, however, Andy has raised a very valid point about the nature of the commissions and the funding and whether it's sufficient. And looking through them, it looks to me as if we've got a fairly small pot of money now, which is 44,000. The potential of it running into a 3-year programme if funds allow. looking through the commissions themselves, they all seem to sort of involve inclusion, regional delivery of youth work and training. Why do we need 3 separate commissions? Why can't we just have one major commission at £44,000 delivered by a third sector organisation for the whole of the region? Because at the moment, we've got Galloway Youth delivering across the region. I don't see how Galloway Youth can deliver across the region. So I wanted the commissions to go forward and be in a position to hit the ground running from the 1st of April. I'm not convinced that the commissions are really what we require at the moment with the small pot of money that we've got. So I'm not going to argue with it today. I don't really have any suggestions because I'm not an expert, but my feeling would be that a £44,000 commission for the whole of the region by a organisation would be better bang for your buck than splitting it down into 3 and having a sort of disparate 3 commissions. But that's just my personal opinion.
In terms of that, we did look at all options, including whether it was best to combine the 3 pots of money that was there from the previous third sector grant. But I think hopefully what members would see within the appendices is that some of these commissions are very specialist services, such as the one for LGBT young people. And
just to jump in there, that's my point. These are regional delivery of youth work, and to me, inclusion is inclusion for everybody. And the work that LGBT do is fantastic, and I would endorse it every single day of the year. But youth work should be about regional delivery for every child that requires youth work, and that's why I just feel that one commission for everybody, including LGBT kids from multiple deprivation, anybody should have the benefit of that. And if we keep breaking them down, we keep putting people into silos, and I don't think that that's positive in 2017. But that, again, is just my personal opinion as a mother of 3 very outward-thinking, grown-up children.
Mark?
Certainly, in terms of the 3 commissions, I think they are different in each element, and understand in terms of the importance of the inclusion element, and that absolutely underpins us in terms of the values of youth work that we would deliver. But my advice to members is that this is the right thing to do in terms of the delivery of these 3 separate commissions. Because of the specialist nature, I understand the logic around thinking of combining them, but in order for some of our most vulnerable young people to be able to move on to what I would call generic youth work provision, sometimes we need to have the step before that that supports them to go on, and that's why we took this approach with the commissions.
Jim? See, we're discussing which Jim it is. Yeah, it's you then, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. When you look at the contracts, it would appear that contract 1, the delivery of the youth mobile work, would be the equivalent of what both Stranraer and Dumfries YMCA are actually providing at the minute. Would you agree with that?
I think it's similar to what they're delivering at the moment, but at the same time, what we're very clear on is that we're not expecting these organisations to continue delivering what they're delivering at the moment, because and being more focused on the outcomes. It's certainly similar to what they're delivering at the moment.
Yeah, so we'll take it that would be the contract that YMCA Dumfries or Stranraer would actually bid for to carry out the vast majority of the work that they're doing at the minute. Last year, Sederunt, under the SLA, were given £12,600 worth of council funding. 6,100 of that went on core funding. The other, whatever's remaining, plus some of their own money, went to provide the youth street work. Under this new contract, they are only going to be provided with the contract to do the youth street work. There is no core funding. If that's the case, as it stands at the minute, and I heard you saying about bringing additional grants, because the council core fund the organisation in Sederunt, they have a £21,000 award from Hollywood Trust for the project manager's job. Because the council core fund, they have a bid well advanced with the National Lottery for £40,000 to employ their 4 workers for the next 2 years. That is all predicated on core funding coming from the council. This contract will remove the core funding, so Stranraer YMCA will be left in the position of handing back £21,000 to the Hollywood Trust and telling the National Lottery, see that £40,000, just forget it because we can't employ staff. Stranraer YMCA, whether we like it or not, will die, will no longer be. So they won't be there to bring your street work there. And there's a whole lot of other stuff that Stranraer YMCA does with the council or for the council that don't charge, that will stop happening. One of those being the disability sports for 35 disabled children, which is run by, the vast majority of the time, by YMCA staff. The person that is qualified to do it was a council employee, is now the project manager for the YMCA. If the YMCA doesn't exist, she will no longer be there, so you will have 35 kids, disabled kids, not getting sports coaching. Now, I know that's got nothing to do with what we're taking here, but this is going to be the result. If we agree these contracts today, the result is Stranraer YMCA will, in all probability, no longer exist. Now, not only will what we're contracting them to do disappear, but there'll be a whole lot of other stuff that they do for the council will disappear. And the council will not be able to do it because they haven't got the staff to do it, either in numbers or in qualifications. And as regards the contracts, what we're being asked here is to agree these commissions, okay? And you're saying that you engaged with YMCA Dumfries because they're the parent one and they give the money to Stranraer. I think that would be semantics because just about half of the money that we give to the YMCA in Dumfries goes to Stranraer. Close enough. But have these commissions actually, do they actually comply with the recommendations that full council on the 24th of March, following scrutiny and performance, that we would engage with commissioners within all sectors? That would include Stranraer YMCA, because they actually do stuff. Engage with key partners. Stranraer YMCA is a key partner, and the need to work in partnership from the outset. Well, Stranraer YMCA is a partner. Now that was agreed for the commissioning and also the sustainability policy that we would promote engagement with our supply chain. We haven't promoted any engagement with Stranraer YMCA, yet they are a supplier. That was agreed at full council on the 15th of December. My contention is that these commissions don't comply with the policies that we've put in place as of March last year and of December last year, and there is no way we should be considering these until we know that they comply with the policies of this council.
Mark?
Just briefly, Chair, I know Mark has had detailed discussion, advice and guidance from the Council's procurement team in developing these these commissions, and he can talk to that in a second. I take the comments made by the Councillor. It's been very challenging to us in terms of the cash limit budget that was available and approved by this committee in terms of moving forward with developing the commissions, the new commissions, based on the Council's priorities and commitments. I think it's fair to say that in endeavouring to do that, we've endeavoured to apply due diligence in terms of making sure that the 3 commissions that we've developed, based on expertise in regard to youth work, have been developed in consultation and dialogue with the current service providers in regard to the grants as we move into the commission from the grant process. And in doing so, I'm not sure, we were very keen to make sure that we didn't look at one specific area in isolation. We treated everybody the same in terms of the opportunity to influence and shape what was coming forward. We would endeavour, obviously, to mitigate risk and share resource across the council, not only in youth work, and the youth work team that is now a region-wide team for the first time I think, as real opportunities to help and share resource and support groups that perhaps wasn't there in terms of capacity in the past. And certainly in terms of the wider leisure and sport, as an example, going back to Councillor McClung's comment around disability sport, happy to pick that up in terms of sharing and mitigating risk. But in terms of the work that officers were tasked with doing, in terms of developing the commissions based on the cash limit available to us, the commissions that before members today are the ones that we as officers felt best deliver on the outcomes as required. But Mark, I don't know you want to pick up on the procurement.
Certainly in terms of the guidance we had received from procurement service was about the engagement with the current grant recipients. And that's why I absolutely, as part of those discussions with Dumfries YMCA, were very clear with them about the need to work collaboratively and engage with Stranraer YMCA, and that was around us being limited as officers, because if we had the discussion with organisations that were not the grant recipient, we then would have had them with a number of other organisations as well that are not in receipt of the grants across the region.
We've spent enough time on this particular aspect. I reiterate that we're coming up to a budget. If you wish to put more, or if your group wishes to lodge a budget putting more money into this particular area, then obviously it's up to you to do so. So can we move on to the recommendations?
Chair, I actually wish to propose an amendment to the recommendations.
Well, that's why we're moving on to the recommendations.
I don't think we can actually stop a member doing that. I totally agree with what you're saying, is we're moving into a budget setting, and if we want to put more money in, and I would congratulate the officers. If you feel I've been getting at you, I apologise.
Jim, could we hear your amendment?
The amendment is that we defer consideration of these contracts, commissions, or whatever you want to call them, until after the council has set its budget.
Well, I would like to move that we look at the recommendations as they are.
Is that, we made a decision last committee on the budget, and this part of the budget process, so I don't know whether that one's competent or not, because, just as you says, if they want to bring forward a budget, with the money in, the extra money in, that's fine. Other groups may do the same. May do, but we've already made the decision last month. I don't know whether that can be overturned, or whether this is overturning, the amendments overturning the decision of last committee. I'm not sure. I can maybe get clarity on that. Yeah, it's fine you saying that. I'm asking officers.
Lucy?
Need to just go and get some further, take some further clarification on that decision.
Lucy needs to get further clarification, so can we adjourn for 10 minutes and come back at 25 past? Okay, members. Lucy, could you give us your advice?
Okay, with regards to the motion put forward by Councillor McClung, unfortunately it's not competent. This is based on the decision at the last Children and Young Persons Lifelong Learning Committee, where members had made the decision to agree the commissions.
Okay, so if we can move to the, and just to reiterate once again, we're coming up with the budget setting. If any group wishes to put additional funding into any part of the council's budget, or indeed remove any funding from that, then they're perfectly entitled to do so at that time. So can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1? And can we agree 2.2? Right. Thank you. Sorry, we're moving on to item 8.
Chair, all I'm wanting is written note of the advice that I've just been given about my motion being incompetent. I want it in writing, please.
That can be arranged.
Okay, if we move on to page 65, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for the period ended 31st of December, and it's Colin Pentland to give the report. Thanks, Colin.
Good afternoon. This report provides...
Thank you. Colin? Sorry.
Good afternoon. This report provides an overview of the Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning budget as at the end of December. This position is an improvement from the position reported last to this committee in December. Overall, at this stage, the report highlights a potential forecast underspend of £65,000. There are a number of pressures within the budget, however, these are manageable level at this stage. As reflected in the report, the service are making great progress in ensuring that savings required in 2016-17 are delivered as planned. At the stage, the delivery in respect of children and families payments is anticipated not to be achieved. However, underspending within other areas of the budget are covering the saving on a temporary basis. All the policy development initiatives are also being progressed as planned. I'm happy to take any questions on this report.
Members?
Thank you, Chair. It says on page 70 that the budgets are actual spend to date are currently being disaggregated. And my understanding from previous meetings was that this process would have been completed by now. And I note that if you work out percentages on the same page, leisure and sport, we're now the figures are to the end of December, which is 3/4 of the way through the financial year, as near as makes no difference. And 0% has been spent on adult learning, which should be, you would imagine, 75%. And leisure and sport, 65% has been spent, which is some way short of 75%. Is this because we're still in the process of disaggregation?
Regards to adult learning, that's correct. The disaggregation has, since the committee report has been written, has been finalised, and we're currently working through those budgets with the relevant managers to ensure that as the proposed disaggregation happened, is what they reflected. That's why there's 560,000 an initial indicative figure that was anticipated. However, that figure has now been updated and finalised subsequently from this report. Regards to leisure and sport, I appreciate it's not 100% accurate sometimes to say 75, 65%, depending on things that maybe come through later on in the year, maybe grant awards that we're waiting on, maybe expenditure for contracts, or for things like year-end recharges that come through. But based on the current forecasting, we're anticipating the leisure and sport services will be around the break-even position.
So, do we have are we confident that at the time we next talk about this, the disaggregation process will be completed?
Yes. Currently, I'm meeting the managers next week to go through the actual detail of it. The actual budget holders have been allocated the budget now to confirm what was agreed at the disaggregation panel.
Thanks. I remember asking the question if we'd have this information in time for budget setting or budget considerations. Are we confident that members will have sight of these disaggregations in time, good time, to amend any budget proposals they may have?
As far as I'm aware, during the budget setting process, when the savings were looking forward to the service was looked at as the budget sat within communities. They were looking at reviewing these budgets as part of the disaggregation process to make sure any savings that could be achieved on an ongoing basis would be presented to members under that review. And the savings weren't getting held up as part of the disaggregation, it was part of that review.
Thanks for that clarification, Colin, but I'm not talking about that. I'm actually saying, some political groups might, and I'm not having a pop at anybody here, might actually want to include some of this stuff either in budget development or service development or whatever it might be, right? We should actually have that available for us to get a full view of how the civil department is going to go forward. And I appreciate it's been a long drawn out process. It's been a very difficult process to disaggregate them. But, so when can we get something in black and white that actually tells us exactly what the new figures are?
Colin?
Is it the handovers happening right now? I can work on that as a matter of course and see about sending that out to let the members as soon as possible. If there's going to be any delays, I can also send that out to you, informing you what the reasonable timescale will be on that basis.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 73, and this is now the third time I've looked at the same report, either this one or at PNR and indeed social work. But I'm looking at page 73, and again, reference is made in page 72. 73 refers to the ASL and other savings mitigation fund, an amount carried forward of 240,000 and applied 150. And it's the narrative. Anticipate that this funding will be used to assist in reducing the impact on the proposed savings have on the service delivery. We had a presentation made to us at the Wigtown Area Committee where the officer, the two senior officers, admitted that we haven't got it right in terms of the assessed needs, the number of hours that a child may require under the coordinated support plan, and that child's plan. It was admitted that there has been an increase to some 5,000 children requiring support for learning, but nowhere have I seen that the actual £5,000 matches the cumulative figure of the number of hours as the 5,000 children would require. I have asked the question at social work, and that was referred to the education department for an answer, and they provided Colin with a copy of that email that I've forwarded since. Could I ask that we get a report back in terms of the delivery as it states in here, and whether we are delivering the service as we are legally required to do under the Coordinated Support Plan and the Child's Plan under the 2014 Children Act, and whether those are square the circle, whether we are delivering on the numbers. It will go back to the assessed needs.
Director?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we're maybe conflating a number of different issues there. In terms of ASL, clearly I wasn't at the committee at which Hugh Smith spoke, but my understanding is what we have said at this committee and another forum is that what we got wrong potentially was in fact how we used the matrix of need across the schools, and although there was actually an increase in the number of hours associated with learning support in ASL, an awful lot of that was soaked up with level 4. So an awful lot was soaked up with schools asking for one-to-one. There was a doubling of the number of kids who were getting one-to-one, and that took away a lot of the support based on the resource that we had for levels 3 or 2, for example. That's what we're looking at for next year. This committee has had a report recently and an update on that agenda, and will receive an update in future too. We've already indicated to schools that the relief funding that was put in to support the agenda will continue until the summer, and we're working on making sure that the matrix for next year is fairer and provides the wider level of support as associated. As you know, again, in terms of budget setting, there was a further 400,000 shortfall to be found for next year, and no doubt members will be considering how to approach and treat that issue.
I hear what Colin said there. Could we perhaps have an update? My understanding, having met with the parents and the officers concerned that I've referred to, that the service is not being delivered in terms of the number of hours that the children require, and there's no indication in any of the assessment as to how many hours they should be receiving, and therefore it's difficult for parents to say whether they're getting the service or not. So could we have an early report? You say that a further report will come in the future. Could we have an early report in terms of the delivery of that service against the savings, and whether indeed we are delivering the services, because there are a number of parents who are saying they are not receiving any support that fall into categories 1, 2 and there's an increase on the level 3.
We're straying off the purpose of this report, but if you'd like to respond briefly.
Yeah, again, I think it would be in everybody's interest, particularly this committee in the future, to receive an update on how the process is progressing next year. I would again highlight that all of the hours that were asked for by the schools was what was actually allocated to the schools in terms of learning support. It's how that was then implemented that was one of the challenges, and we're looking at a better process for next year. In addition to that, Councillor Scobie was good enough to send me a note this morning about a request about information, and I'll make sure that that's followed up with you. Okay.
Can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3? Okay. I've no other urgent items of business.